Shalom, Yahweh Ba'Shem HaMashiach Yahweh Shah Barakatah. ah, had to get y'all attention. Or shall I say, Shalom, Yahweh Ba'Shem HaMashiach Yahoshua Yevarek Otcha. That's the same exact thing. Different accent, if you will. Some that go with the Lashawan Kodash would say, Shalom, Yahweh Ba'Shem HaMashiach Yahweh Shah Barakatah. Or some who do biblical Hebrew, which people call Yiddish, would say, Shalom, Yehovah B'Shem HaMashiach, Yehoshua Yevarek Otka. However, some would say, oh no, we're not going to say the second one because that's Yiddish, and we don't do Yiddish. So, let's talk about it. Yiddish versus Hebrew debate. First question out the gate. Is biblical Hebrew Yiddish? For many years, there has been a major debate in my community regarding Yiddish and biblical Hebrew. Those that subscribe to what they call Lashawan Kodash. Many people simply do not understand the differences between the two, between biblical Hebrew versus Yiddish. So, today we're going to take a clear and honest look at the irrefutable facts surrounding biblical Hebrew versus Yiddish. But first, when we start this lesson, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start with the basics. I mean, basic, surface level, because it's going to be new information to most of you. I want to show you that even at basic level, beginner level, novice level, you can easily spot the differences early on in your research if you stop being lazy and actually pay attention. So we're going to begin by looking at the simple definitions of both words at basic level straight from Google. We're going to start there because many of you all, your research only consists of Google. So we're going to start at basic level so you can see that it is definitely a difference when dealing with biblical Hebrew versus Yiddish. And as you see right here, ladies and gentlemen, you see on one side you have the Israelites, and on the other side you have the Jewish people, and in the middle you have me. All right? So, and you'll find out why. One side says that Yiddish, other side says, well, this is not Yiddish, this is Hebrew, or some of them may say, well, this is Yiddish on this side. However, you have me that's basically going to bridge the gap because I understand it from both sides. I understand what Jewish people would say, and I understand what Israelites would say. You know what I'm saying? So that being said, you have me in the middle that's going to bridge the gap for you all because, believe it or not, to my Hebrew brothers and Hebrew sisters, your elders have not properly educated you on this topic. All right? It doesn't mean that they don't have knowledge and wisdom. It just means that they just didn't know. All right? And they have been saying for many years that when someone says something like Shalom, Yehovah B'Shem HaMashiach, Yehoshua, Yevarek Otka, is Yiddish versus Shalom, Yahweh B'Shem HaMashiach, Yahweh Shah Barakatah. So instead of saying Shalom, I would say Shalom. Instead of saying Yahweh, I would say Yehovah. Instead of saying Bahashem, I would say Bisham. Instead of saying Hamashiach, I would say Hamashiach with a guttural. Instead of saying Yahawashai, I would say Yehoshua or Yeshua, the short form. Instead of saying Barakatha, I would say Yevarech Otka. All right? So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to learn the differences. Oh, and also what we're going to do is we're going to get firsthand, I guess say firsthand information from even people who are known as the Hasidic Jews. We'll hear them giving you the difference. All right, so even they know there's a difference. All right, but people in my community don't know. So that's what we'll do is, we'll run some clips first and then we'll go into it. That's what we'll do. And by the end of this, we'll ask, is Biblical Hebrew Yiddish? So here we go. Yiddish versus Hebrew debate.
Pick up on, I'll show you some stuff. Look at this. These are the magazines. We have our own media. So, this is my magazine. I did some work.
So, do you speak Yiddish?
Yeah, sure.
Do most people here speak Yiddish?
Everyone here.
Everyone?
Yeah.
So, Hebrew, no. Not so much.
Not so much.
The rabbi?
Yeah.
So, Hebrew, no. Not so much.
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 Notice if you were paying attention, he asked him, do you speak Yiddish? And he said, yeah, sure. He said, do most people here speak Yiddish? And he literally said, what? Everyone here speaks Yiddish. And he said, everyone? He said, yeah. Then he said, so Hebrew, no? Like, in other words, so you don't speak Hebrew? And he literally said, no, not so much. Like, no, I don't speak Hebrew. And then he said, not so much. Now ask yourself this. If Hebrew and Yiddish is the same thing, then why is this guy who is clearly Hasidic Jew in New York is saying that he don't speak Hebrew? And not so much. But everybody there speaks Yiddish. Why is he making the distinction in the language if it's the same? Because clearly he knows something that you all in the community don't know. Clearly he knows something that I know that you all don't know. That's why you have me in the middle, and I'm going to bridge the gap for you. Because Hebrew and Yiddish is not the same language. I'm going to repeat that. Hebrew and Yiddish is not the same language. And by the time you're done, you're not going to be able to unsee what you saw in this video. Now let's run that clip back one more time.
Do you speak Yiddish?
Yeah, sure.
Do most people here speak Yiddish?
Everyone here.
Everyone?
Yeah.
So, Hebrew, no. Not so much.
Not so much.
So, Hebrew, no. Not so much.
Not so much.
So, Hebrew, no. Not so much.
Not so much.
So, Hebrew, no. Not so much.
Not so much.
Notice we haven't even gotten to the lesson, and already we see that this Hasidic Jewish guy in New York has already confirmed that Hebrew and Yiddish is not the same thing. He asked him, do you speak Hebrew? And he said, no, not so much. But I thought it was the same language. If it was the same language, then why is he making a distinction? How can you speak Yiddish, but they don't speak it so much? Think about that. Now let's go and listen to a man who's not Jewish. And let's see what he says.
Always lived separately from everyone else. Any language they speak is going to be their own variant of it. So the Jews picked up this Germanic language, and when they wrote it using Hebrew characters.
Pause. Let's break down exactly what this man is saying, and then we'll run the clip back. Because this is where everything starts making sense. And remember, we ain't even got started with the lesson yet. So he said when Jewish people lived separately from everyone else, any language that they spoke their own variant of it. Now, what that mean? It means that they were not speaking biblical Hebrew as a daily spoken language. They were not speaking Hebrew either. They were taking surrounding languages and they were developing their own variant, meaning their own version of them. Then he says they picked up a Germanic language. Now that right there is critical. Germanic language? Germanic language means it came from the same family as German, Dutch, and even English, the language you speak today. Funny how you accuse us of speaking Yiddish, which you already know is Germanic in origins, but yet you speak English, which is Germanic in origins. But notice they're making a distinction that Hebrew and Yiddish is not the same. So if anybody's speaking a Germanic origin language, it would be you speak English. Look at the hypocrisy in that, though. So For anybody who don't know, we're no longer dealing in a Hebrew language family, because remember he said Germanic, which means it comes from the same language family as German, Dutch, and English, which means we're now in the European language family. Then he says when they wrote it, Yiddish, they wrote it using Hebrew characters. So even though it came from different different Germanic languages, they use Hebrew characters. That's key. So when we put this together, they're speaking a Germanic-based language, but they're writing it with Hebrew letters. This is exactly what we've been saying all along. So one of the things you'll learn in this video, when we get to the lesson, Yiddish is just a German language written with Hebrew letters. Literally. Literally. So they're using Hebrew letters with a German dialect. So if I take English and write it using Hebrew letters or consonants, it don't become Hebrew. It's the same thing here. So what this man just explained actually confirms the point. Yiddish is not biblical Hebrew. It is in a different language family that simply use the same writing letters as Hebrew. So if Yiddish comes from a Germanic language, how can it be the same as biblical Hebrew, which comes from a Semitic language? We're going to run this clip back, and when we get through this lesson, you won't be able to see what you saw in this video.
From everyone else, any language they speak is going to be their own variant of it. So the Jews picked up this Germanic language, and when they wrote it using Hebrew characters. So when you look at a page of Yiddish, if you can't tell the difference between Yiddish and Hebrew, it just looks like Hebrew, because all the letters are, it's all in, Hebrew letters.
What time is
it? But, there are various ways to tell the difference. Usually the Yiddish words are much longer than Hebrew words. That's one, sort of quick and dirty way to figure that out.
So before we get started with this lesson, we'll run one more clip. We'll let it play through, and then after that, we're going to jump right into this lesson.
Hey look Mom, I'm studying Yiddish so I can talk to Grandma. Good day guys, this is just a quick video to answer a question that I got, and I decided to make it into a video because I've had this question before and maybe it's something that a lot of people are wondering. The question is, are Hebrew and Yiddish similar, or are Hebrew and Yiddish kind of the same language? The answer to that is no, they are different languages. They're often confused with each other because the Yiddish language is written in the Hebrew alphabet in the same way that Farsi or Urdu are written in the Arabic alphabet, or that German is written in the Roman alphabet just like English is. So someone who doesn't read that script might look at it and think that it's the same language. But Hebrew and Yiddish are different. Another reason they might be confused is that they're both related to Jewish people, but they're related to Jewish people in different ways. So Hebrew is the old language of the Bible, of the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible, as they would call it, or the Torah. And it's also been a literary language of Jews throughout the centuries, often for religious purposes or literary reasons they would write in Hebrew. But it was just a literary language for a long time. It died as a spoken language. But Yiddish was spoken by Jews in Europe. And the language it's mostly related to is German. It's kind of a medieval form of German, but I understand that to some extent Yiddish speakers can communicate with German speakers and they can understand each other, not fully, but to some extent. So it's mostly related to German, but it's been influenced by Hebrew in terms of vocabulary, and also by Aramaic and maybe some other languages too, because Hebrew and Aramaic were Jewish literary languages. So there is some Hebrew vocabulary in it, but I think the pronunciation has kind of been changed and more Germanized, so it doesn't sound like Hebrew so much. So Yiddish was influenced by Hebrew to some extent, though. And also modern Hebrew was influenced by Yiddish because the original Zionists who came to Palestine to create a Jewish state, they were Yiddish speakers, I think, Yiddish and maybe Russian or whatever. But their native languages, like Yiddish and maybe also Russian and others, influenced modern Hebrew. So people say that modern Hebrew's syntax and phonology reflects the Yiddish language to some extent. So Yiddish has influenced modern Hebrew as well, but basically they're separate languages, and you can't communicate with someone who speaks the other. It would be easier for a Yiddish speaker to communicate with someone who speaks German.
Now, one small disclaimer for people in the Hebrew community. When he says modern Hebrew, he is not speaking about biblical Hebrew. So biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew are not the same. I repeat, when he is saying modern Hebrew, he is not speaking about the Hebrew Tanakh that we read. He is not speaking about the Hebrew that you call Yiddish. That is not the same thing. All right, and if y'all need some more clarity on that, ask in the comments. I'll go further in that. But that's not the topic of the discussion. So another thing in the community, when y'all say, y'all reading modern Hebrew. No, we're not. No, we're not. That's going to show you that you all have not dove into this topic. We're not dealing with modern Hebrew, although they both use Hebrew characters as well. All right, let's get to it. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We're going to be dealing with the topic of Hebrew versus Yiddish. If you've never been to my channel, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe at youtube.com/Judah the Shooter. They call me Judah the Shooter because I shoot out scripture, I shoot out information, and I'm a straight shooter, ladies and gentlemen. Some of my latest videos, I did a debate on the color of the Israelites exposed versus religion. All right, I did that one almost a week ago. So definitely check that out, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know what color were the children of Israel in the Bible. Far beyond a reasonable doubt. Check that debate out. I did one called Jesus versus Zeus exposed, going to the Greek language and in that debate, so you can watch that video to see if Jesus is Zeus or is it a myth. You have to watch it to see. Another thing I went over, of course, Numbers 1 and 18 about the seed of your father. I go over the correct context of that. I go over the precept upon precepts. I also did virgin birth series, of course, going into the Hebrew language, going into the Syriac language, going into even the Syriac Sinaiticus itself. Went into some of the Greek earliest manuscripts to see, well, what exactly does it teach? I even had a dialogue with a brother who is a linguist who speaks Hebrew, who had a different view that I did. And you can watch that video as well. And speaking of Hebrew, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of Hebrew, that brings me to this one here. Right here it says, Torah Navin Kitzavim V'Ruach HaKadosha. You go into it, deals with Hebrew there, all right? However, there are some people that say that this is not Hebrew, this is Yiddish. Raise your hand if that's you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have good news for you. By the end of this video, you're going to have the correct understanding. And what you see and what you hear in this video, you'll never be able to go and unsee it. You're never going to be able to unhear it. The lie stops now. So let's get basic. Hebrew definition. All you got to do is go to Google and type this in. It says Hebrew is a Northwest Semitic language of the Afro-Asiatic family. See that? Notice out the gate, it says originating as the language of the ancient Israelites and functioning today as official, all right, revitalized national language of Israel. It says it also refers to a member of this ancient Semitic group, an Israelite or Jew, etc. All right. So that being said, modern language used in daily conversation, media, and government in the state of Israel, etc. She speaks fluent Hebrew. It gives that, and it has here. It gives different examples, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to scroll down real quick. Take your time and read that. When you look at Yiddish definition, it's different. Yiddish is a West Germanic language, and you just learned this in the beginning of the video. Historically spoken by Ashkenazi Jews. Originating in where? Where did it originate at? Central and Eastern Europe around the 10th century. Written in Hebrew characters. You see that? It uses Hebrew characters. It combines German dialects or accents with Hebrew, Slavic, and look at this, You see that? Romans influences. It was traditionally the daily colloquial language vernacular of Ashkenazic Jews, serving as an insider's way of communicating. Now think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Notice we see that there was a difference. One is a Semitic language. The other one is a Germanic language. So one is a Northwest Semitic language. This one is a Germanic language. Not the same thing. So this is not about opinions, feelings, or traditions. This is about language, history, and facts. So we're about to get into it, all right? Starting here. Yiddish versus Hebrew. Let's deal with facts. Not opinions, not emotions, just facts. I'll pull these definitions directly. It's not me talking. This is what the sources themselves say. And remember, this is just basic before we dive into this. Hebrew is a Northwest Semitic language of the Afro-Asiatic family, originating as the language of the ancient Israelites. Let me slow that down. Ancient Israelites, not Europe, not medieval times. Ancient. Now let's look at Yiddish. Yiddish is a West Germanic language, historically spoken by Ashkenazi Jews, originating in Central and Eastern Europe, not ancient Israel, but Central and Eastern Europe around the 10th century. Let me slow that down too. Germanic, European, 10th century. Just like your English language is also Germanic, also European. Now we have a clear contrast. And look, we haven't even dove into this yet. Hebrew, ancient, Semitic, Israelite. And when you say Semitic, Noah had 3 sons. One of his sons' name was Shem. So it let you know it comes from that lineage and that line. Shem. All right. Yiddish, European, Germanic, much later. These are not the same language. They do not come from the same root. They don't come from the same time period. They don't come from the same people historically. Now, here's where people get confused. Yiddish is written with Hebrew letters. We know that. But listen carefully. Using Hebrew letters does not make it Hebrew. I'm going to say that again. Using Hebrew letters does not make it Hebrew. That's like writing English with Hebrew letters and calling that Hebrew. That would be false. Because the structure, the grammar, the origin, all of that is Germanic. Whether you deal with English, Dutch, Yiddish, all of it is Germanic. All of it is European. And the definition, remember this basic level, because we're going to level up. And the definition even tells you plainly Yiddish combines German dialects with Hebrew, Slavic, and Romance influence. So what is it? A mixed European language with some Hebrew influences, just like we learned in these clips earlier. But it's not the original language of the Israelites. Talking about Yiddish. Meanwhile, Hebrew is directly tied to the prophets, the scriptures, the ancient people of Israel. That's not a mixture. That's a root language. Yiddish is not ancient Hebrew. Yiddish is not the original language of the Israelites. Yiddish is a European language written in Hebrew script. That's it. This isn't about feelings. This isn't about tradition. This is about language, history, and facts. If you can read the definitions already told to you, right? I mean, if you can read, the definitions already told you everything. The problem is most people don't actually read. So before we go further into this, ladies and gentlemen, that's basic entry level. All you got to do is look the definitions up, and the definitions itself will tell you there's a difference. And look, y'all, we haven't even dove into the language yet to show not the same thing. All you got to do, guys, is stop being lazy and stop repeating what you hear someone else say and look into this for yourself. So now that we've established the definitions, we're not going to stay in theory. Oh no. We're going to look at the evidence directly. I'm about to show you both languages side by side so you can see the difference for yourself. No guessing, no debating, just observation. We're going to the same passage in both Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. I just figured I'd start with the first page of the Bible. Same text, two different languages, meaning Yiddish versus Hebrew. Pay attention to the structure, the words, and even, ladies and gentlemen, if you know the difference, how it reads. First, let's take a look at Genesis 1, 1 through 8 in Yiddish, ladies and gentlemen. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Honestly, as a person who reads Hebrew, these are Hebrew letters, right? They're definitely Hebrew letters. I can identify every single Hebrew letter there. I can identify every letter, right? Like, for example, I can tell you right here, this word Bereshit, because I know the structure of that. That's in the beginning. No problem, right? I can tell you that right here, there's the Aleph, the first letter in Hebrew. That's an Aleph right here. That's a Yod. That's a Nun Sofid, right? But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? All people who can read Hebrew will agree with that. But guess what we all have in common? We can't read that. We can't read it. And as we dive deeper into this, you'll find out why. Right? Now, there are certain things I can make out here. Torah Navim, Uktuvim, which is the law, the prophet, and the writings, etc. Targum, etc. Translations, etc. Right? Yiddish, right? So there are things, so up here we can. But we get to the text, man, we got a problem. We got a problem. Now I want you to look at the structure of verse 1 or even 1 through 8. Take a look at it, screenshot it, because you're going to see a difference later. This is the Genesis chapter 1, 1 through 8 in Yiddish. In Yiddish. However, now that you've seen that, we're going to look at the exact same passage. But this time, we're not going to look at it in Yiddish. We're going to look at it in biblical Hebrew. Take a screenshot. Take a screenshot. Look at the structure of the words and you'll see. Right here. See, I can read that. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. V'haaretz hata tohu v'vohu v'choshet al pinei. Tohu v'ruach Elohim marve al pinei hamayim. V'yimer Elohim yehi or v'yehi or. V'yar Elohim et kito v'yavdeh Elohim bein ha'or uvein ha'choshech. Vayikra Elohim la'oriyam v'lachoshech ha'rei laila v'yehi arev v'yehi voche yam echad. V'yimer Elohim yehi rakiya betoch hamayim vahi mavdil bin mayim lamayim. Vayas Elohim es harakiya vayavdil bin hamayim asher misachat larakiya uvein hamayim asher me'al larakiya vayikin. Vayikra Elohim larakiya shemayim vayi rev vayi voker yom shenei. I can read that. Anybody who reads biblical Hebrew can read that. Genesis 1, 1 through 8. Up top, Bereshit, in the beginning. Aleph, first letter in Hebrew. We can read that. You put this in our face, we got a problem. We have a problem, although they are using the same Hebrew letters. But notice, look, you can see that it's not laid out the same. When you look at the verses, look at verse 1 up top. Look at verse 1 right here. Not laid out the same. Look, guys, you don't even have to know Hebrew or Yiddish to know that don't look the same. That don't look the same. You put a Hebrew Bible in front of somebody and a Yiddish Bible in front of somebody, do not be surprised if the person don't know both of them. That is very common. You heard the Hasidic Jewish guy said, all of them speak Yiddish, but Hebrew, no, not so much. Not so much. Why? Because there are some vocabulary that would be the same. But no, it's not the same language. Not so much. So, that being said, now you just saw both, same passage, Genesis 1, verse 1 through 8, right? We just saw that. But what did you actually notice? They do not look the same. They do not read the same. They do not function the same. Let's deal with this clearly. Both of these are written using Hebrew letters. That's just the facts. We can't get around that. But listen carefully. Hebrew letters do not equal the Hebrew language. I need you to understand that. Hebrew letters do not equal the Hebrew language. What you saw first was Yiddish. What you saw second was Biblical Hebrew. These are two completely different languages. Now, here's the key point that most people miss. Just because you can recognize the letters does not mean you can read the language. Let me make it plain. A person who reads Biblical Hebrew does not automatically read Yiddish. And a person who reads Yiddish does not automatically read Hebrew. Why? Because the structure is different. The grammar is different. The vocabulary is different. The origin is different. Hebrew is a Semitic language. It reads from right to left with a specific structure tied to the ancient Israelites. The words, the roots, the meanings all come from that system. However, Yiddish, again, is a Germanic language. It may use Hebrew letters, but the way it reads is based on German structure, not Hebrew structure. So what happens? You can look at the Yiddish text and say, I recognize those letters. But when you try to read it, it does not make sense because it's not Hebrew. It's the same concept as this. If I take English and write it using Hebrew letters, that does not suddenly make it Hebrew. It's still English. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that, ladies and gentlemen, because I've seen people do this. Let's see. Let's take the word let me see. We'll use the word let me see. Bat, right? No, we'll use the word cat, right? Cat. Check this out. This here is called a chav right there. A chav. This here is called an aleph. And that there is called a tav, or we could say a ted. That does not say cat, even though that would be equivalent to CAT. This would be equivalent to CAT. That don't make that Hebrew because you spelled it out that way. No. You get what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that. Or if I want to say house, right? We have the letter hey. We have the cholam. And then I would have to use another one, U. Then we have the samich, S. And then, hell, we'd have to use an aleph because there's no E sound. You get what I'm saying? That would be the best way to say house, which what you would know as House. But that's not Hebrew right there. Those are Hebrew letters. You get what I'm saying? But that's not Hebrew because cat is chatul. House is bait. If you want to say like house of Judah, it would become bait, become bait. Beit Yehuda, house of Judah. So people do that all the time. They'll recognize like characters and then they'll try to spell it out like that. It doesn't work that way. So if somebody was to put that, if you would have what I just wrote out, if you would have put that in front of somebody who read Hebrew, they'll be looking at you like you're crazy. What? I don't say no cat. I don't say house. What are you talking about? So, as I mentioned earlier, if I take English and write it using Hebrew letters, like I just said, cat and house, that does not subtly make it Hebrew because you use Hebrew English equivalent. It doesn't mean that. It's still English. It's using Hebrew letters. Really. So that's exactly what you're seeing here when you look at the Yiddish Bible versus the Hebrew Bible. Yiddish is a different language that is simply written using Hebrew script, using Hebrew letters, consonants. So let's be clear and direct. Hebrew and Yiddish are not the same. They do not come from the same origin. They do not function the same. And they are not interchangeable. And this is why someone can be fluent in one, Hebrew, right? And still be completely lost in the other, Yiddish. Or somebody can be completely fluent in Yiddish but might not be fluent in the other. Remember the clip you heard earlier? He asked that man, do you speak Hebrew? Now, this is a man that's Jewish, Hasidic, in a Jewish neighborhood with Yiddish writing all over there. And he said, Hebrew, no, I don't. Not so much. And the more you dive into this, the more it makes sense. Now, let's take this a step further so nobody misses this. Because some of y'all might still be thinking, well, if it uses the same letters, shouldn't it be the same thing? No, no, no. Let's break that mindset down right now. If you see this, hola, ¿cómo estás? Right? You recognize the letters, right? But can everybody read English actually understand that? No, no. Because the letters are the same, but the language is different. If you see this, hola, ¿cómo estás? You recognize the letters. And those who speak Spanish, you know this, hello, how are you doing, etc. But can everybody reading English actually understand that? No. Because the letters are the same, but the language is different. I use this because many of us understand this Spanish greeting, but some won't be able to understand that. You may say, well, that was easy. I got this. Well, okay, let's take it further. Look at English and German. Both use the same Roman alphabet. English and German do. You might look at German and think, I see letters I know. I should be able to read this. Then you see something like this. Guten Morgen, we get it's dear. And I'm sure I literally butchered that. Right? But now you're stuck because, again, same letters, different language. This is the exact same situation with Yiddish and Hebrew. So look, this is German. But although you may understand, you may know each letter, right? But you don't know the language. It's the same difference with Yiddish and Hebrew. Now let's bring it all together with what you're looking at right now. Take a look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through 8 again. But this time, look at this here. Look at where next to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8. Notice you can recognize every single letter there, right? But you may not can read that. But the one in bold print, you can read that, right? Even though both of them use the same English letters. However, what language is that? That's Latin. This is Latin right here, ladies and gentlemen. Now look closely. Did you see the English letters? Yes. As you see right here. Did you see the English letters? Yes. Can you recognize those letters? Yes. But here's the real question. Can you actually read it? Can you actually pronounce everything out fluently just as you can do English? Most people cannot. Why? Because even though it uses the same letters as English, it's not English. That's the point. Let it sink in. So if you say you know English, which is Germanic, right? And I say, hey, well, read this Latin right here. Can you read that just as fluently? It uses English letters. And the moment you can't read that, the moment you can begin to understand where I'm coming from, where others are coming from. Yes, it has the same letters, but the structure, the sounds, and the rules are not the same. It's no different from Biblical Hebrew and Yiddish. The same letters don't equal the same language. So Latin don't equal English, and English don't equal Latin, and neither one of those equals Spanish. So when you look at Yiddish and say, I see Hebrew letters, so this must be Hebrew. You Hebrews, y'all dealing with Yiddish. Ak means brother, by the way, y'all. If y'all say that, that's a mistake and it's disingenuous. Because just like English and Spanish, English and German, and English and Latin are all different. You're dealing with different languages using the same writing system. Why? Because it's English letters. Same writing system. That's just about it. And that is why Someone can look at Yiddish, recognize every single letter, and still not understand a single word, while someone fluent in Hebrew can read Hebrew clearly, but struggle with Yiddish. Now you're not guessing anymore. Now you actually are seeing the difference, ladies and gentlemen. I'm showing you things that your elders haven't shown you. So now you've seen it for yourself, not opinions, not assumptions, not what someone told you. You saw it. You saw Yiddish. You saw Biblical Hebrew. And you saw Latin. Different languages, different structures, different origins, different meanings. But what did they all have in common? They use familiar letters. And that is exactly what people get confused. So let me leave you with this first point. In this, just because it looks familiar does not mean that it's the same. Letters can match and still carry completely different languages. So they can have the same writing system, but it's different languages, different structures, different meanings, different origins. And if you don't understand that, you will keep mistaking one thing for something it is not. You will mistake Biblical Hebrew for Yiddish and Yiddish for Biblical Hebrew. But now you're not guessing anymore. You are observing. You are thinking. You are actually seeing what's in front of you. You are growing now. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now it's time to level this up even more. This is where we separate surface level from real understanding, ladies and gentlemen. So remember, everything you saw up until this point, remember, as basic entry level. I have to at least first get you to see there's differences. Same letters, there are differences. So now we're about to level up even more, ladies and gentlemen. If you thought that that was difficult for you to get past, then guess what? We're about to go further and further out into the deep end. If you've understood the first part, though, now this is good for you because now you can have a life jacket when you're in the deep end. Everybody else is about to drown. So the further we go through this, the better chance they have of drowning. So let's go further out into the deep end. Can you swim? Linguistically? Let's see. So, let's make this even bigger here. Because we're not just dealing with different words, Hebrew versus Yiddish. We're dealing with different grammatical systems, Hebrew versus Yiddish. Now, let's lock in on this grammar and the actual verse. We're going to compare Genesis chapter 1, ladies and gentlemen, in Yiddish with Genesis chapter 1 in biblical Hebrew, not opinions. We're looking at what's actually written. Let's start with biblical Hebrew. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et ha'aretz. Remember we read that earlier. Transliteration, put it here. Bereshit, in the beginning, bara means created, Elohim is God, et is a direct object marker. It does not translate, there's no equivalent. Hashemayim, the heavens or the sky, ve'et, and object marker, of course, as well, because you got the word et again. Ha'aretz, the earth. Now pay attention to the grammar, Hebrew structure. The verb comes before the subject. Created God. Remember, bara, Elohim, created God. So the verb created came before the subject, God. Also notice this clearly. Et, as I told you earlier, is the object marker. That is a grammatical marker. It tells you what the action is being done to. English does not have this. Yiddish does not have this. English does not have this. Yiddish does not have this. Now let's look at Genesis 1:1 in Yiddish from the Yiddish Bible. All right. So guess what, ladies and gentlemen? People who read Hebrew most likely can't read that. That's not Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et ha'aretz. See that? It's not. Look at that. It's Hebrew letters, though. Now stop and look closely. First major difference, the word order, Yiddish. God created. See this? Hot, and that's the word got right there. Hot and got. Not bara Elohim. See that? Not at all. Not this word bashafan here for created. At all. That is not small. That is a completely different grammatical system. Second difference, look at the verbs. In Hebrew, bara, we call it call stem, simple action word, root base, versus the word for created in Yiddish. It's not bara. That is not bara. That word is longer. Remember we heard the man earlier say one of the differences you can see that the words are usually longer? Well, here's the case in point. This here's bara. This here is basafan, a basafin. You Yiddish people, comment and correct me on that pronunciation if I'm wrong, which I sure I am. That is not coming from Hebrew verb structure. This is built from a Germanic system. Different verb system, different origins. Third difference. Look for et in Yiddish. You won't find it in that passage. Why? Because Yiddish does not use a direct object marker like Hebrew. Instead, it uses words like dim and di. These are articles like the. So in Hebrew, we have a definite article, hey. All right. But in Yiddish, they don't use that in that verse. They use dim and di. So Hebrew marks the object with a grammatical particle. Yiddish marks it with articles like European languages. Fourth difference. All right. Look at the words themselves. Hashemayim. Hebrew. Yiddish is himil. Himil. Different words. These are not the same words, not even close. Hebrew. Haaretz, meaning the land of the earth. Yiddish don't say haaretz. It used the word erd. Erd. Somebody who speaks Yiddish, comment down and let me know that word. Because we know the haaretz in either of our texts. Well, I'm from the Yiddish text. Again, completely different words. So yes, you may recognize the letters, but the words are different. The order is different. The grammar is different. The verb system is different. So again, you may can recognize that those three letters there are ayin, resh, and dalet, right? Yeah, we can recognize that. And here's something else you need to notice. Look at the Yiddish text. Even though it uses Hebrew letters, the letter combinations and spelling patterns are not Hebrew. Your eye may say, I see Hebrew letters, but your brain should say, this is not Hebrew language. Oftentimes people send me things and they be like, translate this. And I'll be looking like, I don't know what that say. That's Yiddish. But you read Yiddish. No, I don't. I don't. I don't. You get what I'm saying? Like people who read Hebrew would struggle. It would be catastrophic putting some Yiddish in our face. And vice versa. Same thing. You heard a guy that said all of them, all the Hasidic Jews in New York speaks Yiddish. But Hebrew, no, not so much. So if it's the same, then why is he saying no, not so much? Because he know what I know. Now let's make it plain. Hebrew is root-based because we have three-letter root words. It's verb-driven. Uses markers like at, direct object marker, ancient Semitic structure. Yiddish, on the other hand, is not the same. It is German-based, means it's a Germanic language. It's subject-driven, dealing with the subject first. It uses articles like deem and di, instead of like the direct article hey. So if you want to say the house, habayit, habayit, the house. You get what I'm saying? Etc. So this is European grammatical structure. All right. So when you compare Genesis 1 side by side, you are not looking at the same language. You are not looking at the same language written differently. You are looking at two completely different languages. And now you are not just seeing letters, you are seeing structure, you're seeing grammar, you are seeing the truth behind what is actually written. Now let's take it even further. Plural versus singular forms, Elohim. You have the word bara. This is plural in form, but used with a singular verb, bara. That is a very specific Hebrew grammatical feature. But in Yiddish, it's different. That's the word got. That is just singular. No complexity, no plural form with singular action. On one of the points I'm making is this. Hebrew carries grammatical depth that Yiddish does not mirror. Hebrew carries grammatical depth that Yiddish does not mirror. All right? The word heavens, hashemayim, this is a dual form. Hebrew has a special grammatical category for things in pairs or extensions. Himil, which is the equivalent of hashemayim, just a normal singular word. My point is this. Hebrew has grammatical categories that do not even exist in Europe. I'm sorry, in Yiddish. Sorry about that. The prefix system. Let's deal with that. Hebrew attaches meaning directly to words. Ve'et. All right. The vav, or the wa, as some would say, means and. Then it's attached to the et, the object marker. Yiddish, on the other hand, separates words. Un. Look at this, and look is longer versus this word here. Meaning, Hebrew builds meaning inside the word. Yiddish builds the meanings with separate words. That's not the same, ladies and gentlemen. Verb simplicity versus root system. The word bara, create, created, or he create, it comes from a three-letter root. Everything connects back to that root system, but in Yiddish it's different. But shafin is different. It don't follow that same system. It follows more of a German-style verb construction. That's why you heard the man earlier say a person who speaks Yiddish, he was basically saying that they more than likely understand somebody who speaks German and vice versa than someone like myself who deals with Hebrew. Why? Because Yiddish, although it uses Hebrew characters, it's a Germanic structure, Germanic language, Germanic style verb structure, Germanic dialect, Germanic accent, just with Hebrew letters. No different from how Latin has English letters, but it's not the same thing. My point is also this. Hebrew is root driven. Yiddish is not root driven, meaning the root words. This means that Hebrew and Yiddish is not even structured the same, even though you see Hebrew letters. Let's look at Genesis 1 and 3, and God said. So you see right here, and God said, that's what we're going to focus on. Let there be light, and there was light. This is not going to be Yiddish, it's going to be Hebrew. It says, Vayomer Elohim yehi or veyehi or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light, as we see right there in Genesis 1 and 1. We're going to focus on the Vayomer Elohim, that part, which brings me here. Vayomer Elohim. When you see that vav right there, ladies and gentlemen, in Hebrew, we call it a vav consecutive form, all right? So it carries tense and sequence in one word. All right, it's a continuation. It will be like somebody saying, Johnny went to the store and he bought something and he took something and he went back home. And, vav consecutive. All right, it's ongoing, it's a continuation. But in Yiddish, they would say something like here, got, hat, and I forgot what that word is right there. But anyway, separate words doing separate jobs, which means that my point is this. Hebrew compresses meaning into one word, but Yiddish spreads it out across multiple words. This shows that Yiddish and Hebrew are not the same. So Hebrew would compress the word, Yiddish would spread it out. Remember the guy earlier said one of the secrets in learning the differences is that Yiddish words are usually longer. Why? Because they spread it out across multiple words versus Hebrew would compress it. All right. Number 6, you have the look test. Very important. The look test. Take a look. Have anyone who says that Yiddish and biblical Hebrew is the same? Starting with the people in my community, because pretty much we the only ones that really say that. Make them do this live. Put both texts side by side, Genesis 1 Yiddish and biblical Hebrew. Ask them, do the words match? They gotta say no. Do the patterns match? They gotta say no. Do the endings match? They gotta say no. They gotta say no. And you can literally go and get the Torah online in Yiddish, y'all. Y'all do know that, right? I have copies. If anybody wants to know how you can find it, comment down below and I'll send you the information so you can get a Yiddish Torah. And if you want to see a Hebrew Torah, comment down below and I'll send it to you and you can see it's not the same thing. Even though they got Hebrew letters, no different from Latin using English words. Spanish using English words is not the same. All right? It's not the same at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, understand that. When someone is lying to you and telling you, oh, Yiddish is Hebrew, Hebrew is Yiddish. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not the same thing at all. So let's go back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to it. Let me put my screen back up. Okay, here we go. We got the look test, right? You see this? Yiddish and Hebrew, right? The look test. Have anyone who says that Yiddish and biblical Hebrew is the exact same? Anybody who say y'all reading Yiddish, all right, make them do it live. Put both texts side by side, Genesis 1 Yiddish and biblical Hebrew, and ask them, do the words match? Do the patterns match? Do the endings of the words match? If you want, you can screenshot this right here and ask them on the. No, it's not for you. So that being
right, I'll step back.
Thank you. So Yiddish is German-based written, and Hebrew letters, right, as we see right there on the other side, biblical Hebrew, original Semitic language of the text. You see that? Matter of fact, watch this. Hey, Alexa, what's the difference between Yiddish and biblical Hebrew? Or is it the same?
Yiddish and Biblical Hebrew are quite different. Biblical Hebrew is an ancient Semitic language from the Middle East, while Yiddish is a Germanic language that developed in Europe much later. They use the same alphabet but have distinct origins, structures, and sounds.
Wow. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yiddish and Biblical Hebrew are quite different languages. Biblical Hebrew is an ancient Semitic language from the Middle East, while Yiddish is a Germanic language that developed in Europe much later. They use the same alphabet but have distinct origins, structures, and sounds.
So if I read biblical Hebrew, would it be easy for me to read Yiddish or would it be difficult for me?
Reading Biblical Hebrew wouldn't make reading Yiddish easy. While they share the same alphabet, their grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation are quite different. Yiddish is a Germanic language, while Hebrew is Semitic.
So if somebody's reading the Bible in Hebrew, is that Yiddish?
Reading the Bible in Hebrew is not the same as reading in Yiddish. Hebrew is a Semitic language, while Yiddish is a Germanic language that developed much later in Europe. They use the same alphabet, but their grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation are quite different.
Last question. Why do some people who can speak Yiddish fluently, like the Hasidic Jews in New York, how is it that they can read, and they can read and speak Yiddish, but they're not so good at reading and speaking Hebrew?
Hasidic Jews in New York often speak Yiddish fluently, but may struggle with Hebrew because Yiddish serves as their everyday language, while Hebrew is reserved for religious texts and prayers. This separation helps maintain Hebrew's sacred status.
So if a person speaks German and a person speaks Yiddish and a person who can read biblical Hebrew and they all start speaking, Which one more than likely can understand each other?
The German and Yiddish speakers would likely understand each other best. Yiddish is a Germanic language, so it shares many similarities with German, making it easier for them to communicate than with the Biblical Hebrew reader.
Thank you. That is all.
You're welcome. Glad I could help clear up those language differences.
Wow. Hey, I've never asked that question. That's deep. We just heard it live. Hopefully, my camera, and my recording picked up on that. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know when I play this back, but that was good. That just confirmed everything right there, ladies and gentlemen. You see, it don't take much. Maybe that was the Most High because it came on when I was like, hold on, wait, I ain't need you. Wait, matter of fact, let me ask you. Let me ask you. Wow. So, y'all heard it. Let's continue. They will see what we all see, and they would have no choice but to say no, like it's not the same. Because remember, the questions was, do the words match? Do the patterns match? Do the endings match? They would have to say no. The pronunciation kills shots. Even if someone tries to read Yiddish like Hebrew, they will pronounce it wrong because the sounds follows different rules. My point is this: they don't know that. Like the people who you are, this is Yiddish. They won't know that. They just see Hebrew letters, which they think is modern Hebrew, which is not. So, the same letters have different sound system. You may recognize words or even letters and not know that they don't all sound the same. First kill shot. After showing them this, say this to them, ladies and gentlemen. Now you tell me, if this was the same language, why doesn't it read the same, sound the same, or even function the same? If you say it does, then the burden of proof is on you to show it without running and changing the topic. Because you know they're going to try to deflect. You know they're going to try to change the topic. They're going, oh, the white man and X, Y, and Z. No. Don't let them do none of that. Make them stick to what is being asked of them. Make them show you. Make them show you. But look, here's some reasons they would dodge the smoke. First, we got the origins, Hebrew versus Yiddish. Hebrew is an ancient Semitic language, comes from the same family as Aramaic and Arabic. Yiddish is a Germanic language, comes from Middle High German with some Hebrew influences. My point is this: they would dodge that smoke because in reality, Biblical Hebrew and Yiddish do not come from the same language family at all, even though they use Hebrew characters or Hebrew script. Point two, this is why they'll dodge that smoke. Alphabet use versus language identity. Hebrew, the letters and the language match. Yiddish, Hebrew letters used to write a non-Hebrew language. My point is, script does not define the language. So just because you see the Hebrew letters, that don't mean that it's Yiddish. Vowel system. This one here, I had to spend a little time on because a lot of people in the community, they'll say, well, right there, y'all reading Yiddish because ancient Hebrew, or what they call Lashon Kodash, it didn't have vowels, right? So if I'm saying something like Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'etzaretz, they would say it like Bara Sha'ah bara Alahayim al hashamayim wa al ha'aratzazah. Instead of saying Shalom, they would say Shalawam. Instead of saying Todah, they'll say Tawada. You get what I'm saying? So instead of say Eloheinu, they'll say Elahayanawa. You know what I'm saying? So instead of saying Avinu Shabbat Shemayim Yikades, they would say Abanawa Shabbat Shemayim Kodash, etc. They'll do the A class vowels, if you will. All right. So that being said, vowel system. Biblical Hebrew originally written without vowels. Later added nikud marks for pronunciation. Nikud or nikudot. Nikud is just means dots. Nikudot is dots is in plural. So nikud is dot. Nikudot is dots and dashes, diacritical marks, which we'll learn a little further as we go. Biblical Hebrew originally without vowels, later added nikud marks for pronunciation. Yiddish, however, uses Hebrew letters as vowels themselves. For example, Aleph, Vav, Yod, used to represent sounds like A, O, I. The point. Yiddish changes how the letters function. Let's deal with the vowel argument the right way. Yes, ancient Hebrew does not originally have vowel points like you all say. That's true. But that does not mean that Hebrew had no way to show vowels at all. Hebrew already had something called matrix lectionis, or in Hebrew, im Korea, the mother of reading. I should have put that there, but I didn't. Oh well. These are letters used to help indicate vowel sounds. Examples: Aleph, Vav, or some would say Wa, Yod, and Hey. So even before vowel points existed, Nikud, Dot, or Nikud, Hebrew still had internal vowel indicators. Then later, scholars added Nikud, which are dots and marks, to preserve pronunciation more precisely, ladies and gentlemen, more precisely. So now understand this clearly. Hebrew has two systems working together. The matrix lectionis system inside the word, i.e., letters that were used to indicate vowels like Aleph, Vav, Yod, Hey, or Aleph, Wa, Yod, Hey, right? Matrix lectionis, or in Hebrew, im Korea, inside the word. Nikud added around the word, those dots around the Hebrew words. Now let's deal with Yiddish. Yiddish also uses letters like Aleph, Vav, and Yod, right? They do as well. But here's the difference. In Hebrew, those letters are a part of a root-based system. So in Hebrew, right, we learned that Hebrew still had internal vowel indicators, right? These were used to indicate a vowel. Here, there's a difference. Those letters are a part of a root-based system. They assist pronunciation, but the structure still comes from the three-letter roots. In Yiddish, those same letters are used as vowel carriers in a German-based language. There is no Hebrew root system controlling the meaning, though. That's important. So the letters may look similar, but the function is not the same. And here the kill shot. Hebrew uses vowel helpers with a root system. Yiddish uses those same letters to build a completely different language. If using letters like Aleph, Va, or Wa, and Yod made something Hebrew, then every language using those letters would be Hebrew. And we know that ain't the case. That's not how language works. My point is this. The matrix lectionis system, or the mother of reading, or in Korea, do not make something Yiddish. Nikud does not make something non-Hebrew. Structure, roots, and grammar define the language. Take a look at this here. Here's the example. So you notice one right here, ladies and gentlemen. When we see one at the top, one at the bottom, right? You see the dots going around the words, right? That's the nikudot. But at the bottom, same text, no dots, no cancellation marks, right? So this one up top has the dots and the cancellation marks, which is this here, that there, that there, that there. All these are cancellation marks. The dots are the nikudot, all right? Now look closely. So look, here we got Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et tongue twist. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. All right. In the beginning, created God, or God created et, object marker, hashamayim, the heavens, ve'et, and haaretz, the earth. But right here, we see the same thing, but the nikudot, or the nikudot, or the dots, are not there. Right? So some people, here's another fun fact. There are a lot of people who can read Hebrew with the dots only, and there's some that can't read them without them. So some people would struggle at reading without Nikud, without the dots, even though they can read Hebrew. All right. That can be a major challenge as well, unless someone has literally been there for years and years and years, and they have recognized the patterns, etc. They become familiar with it, or there's someone who grew up as Hebrew is their first language. Other than that, more than likely you will struggle. More than likely. So I want to make that clear, ladies and gentlemen. Now that being said, let's continue. So we see right here in both photos that I put here for you. Now look closer at what you're seeing. Same verse. They both are the same verse, Genesis 1 and 1. But one has extra markings and the other does not. So the one at the top got the extra markings. See that? Got the extra markings. And this one does not. The top one shows vowel points and cancellation marks. The bottom one removes them. Now here's the question. Did the language change? No. Did the meaning change? No. Did the words change? No. So what are you actually looking at? Let's define it clearly. Vowel points are small dots and lines added to the letters, as we just saw up top here, versus the one at the bottom does not. The purpose is simple. They preserve pronunciation. They tell you how to correctly say the word. So the one at the top tells me how to sound these words out. Versus the one at the bottom, I don't see it. That don't mean the language didn't change. It's just that the system did. Hold on, wait, let me go back, undo that. That was great. There we go. The system, the dots. See that? So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the vowel points are small dots and lines added to the letters. Their purpose is simple. They preserve pronunciation. They tell you how to correctly say the word. Now, the other marks you see are called cancellation marks. These are not vowels. These are reading guides. They show you where to pause, how to chant, how the sentence flows when reading out loud. So understand this clearly. Vowel points help you pronounce the word. Cancellation mark help you read the sentence correctly. But here's the key. Neither one changes the language at all. Neither one changes the language. So let me say that again so it sticks with you all. They do not create Hebrew. They preserve Hebrew. It don't become Yiddish at all because that's Germanic in origins. The language was already there. These were added later to protect accuracy, not to change identity. Now, this is where people get confused. They see dots and marks and say, this must be something different. No. That is like taking English and adding pronunciation guides. Example, read, R-E-A-D, versus read, R-E-E-D. You might add marks to show how to say it, but it's still English. That's the same thing in Hebrew, ladies and gentlemen. Read versus read. For example, I'll give an example, right? Here's some other examples. C versus C. Which C am I talking about? C versus C. When I said C, I meant the letter C. You might have thought S-E-A, or you might have thought S-E-E. In Hebrew, those dots tell me which is which. That's an example. Or heal. Heal. What does that mean? Heal. I didn't mean to heal you. H-E-A-L. I meant H-I-L-L. Heal. You see that? That shows, those dots shows me how to sound the words out. It doesn't change the language. It just preserves how it sounds. That's all it does, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't change anything. Oh, I don't know, vowel points, they added that to preserve it, not change anything. So, same thing here, kill shot. If removing the vowel points still leaves the same Hebrew words, then the vowel points never change the language in the first place. Understand this, Hebrew without marks is still Hebrew. Hebrew with marks it's still Hebrew. So whether you deal with the top one or the bottom, you're still dealing with the same language. There's no difference. It's the same. With the exception, one tells me how to sound the letters out more accurately and more precise. The other one does not. Still the same. If you don't know the difference between R-E-A-D and R-E-E-D, English is still English. It don't change. The marks guide you. They do not redefine the biblical language. So when you see this difference on the screen, do not let it confuse you. It's the same language. Just one version is showing you how to read it more precisely. And that is how we shut that argument down completely. Understand Hebrews that nobody can trap you on any of these points from a linguistic perspective when you tell people this. Now, point 4, word borrowing. Hebrew words come from Hebrew roots. Yiddish is a mix of German words, Hebrew words, Slavic words. Remember earlier you learned, as the man was telling you, that Yiddish has some Hebrew influences. Well, that would be why. Because they borrow. It's a mixture. Remember we learned from the other guy that where they were living, they use their own variant of the language. What is this? Why, ladies and gentlemen? Point. Yiddish is a blended language. Hebrew is not. Sentence flow, like how a verse would flow. Hebrew often used the verb first. Example, mindset, created God. Yiddish, subject first, like English. Example, God created. Point. Different thinking patterns and sentence structure. Now remember, because English is also Germanic, Yiddish is also Germanic, that will explain why we would look at it as God created first. Point. Different thinking patterns in sentence structure. Which brings me to point 6, gender system. Hebrew. Every noun is masculine or feminine. Verbs and adjectives must match. Yiddish, however, also has gender, but it follows German rules, not Hebrew rules. Point. Even when similar, the systems are not the same. Which brings me to point 7, the verb system. Hebrew is built on a root system. 3-letter roots control the meaning. Yiddish uses German-style verbs, prefixes, and helpers like hot. The point is, totally different way of forming meaning. Point 8 and 9. When dealing with the reading experience, Hebrew, if you know it, then you can read Tanakh, which is what you call the Old Testament, directly. Yiddish, even if you know Hebrew letters, you may still be lost. The point, recognition of letters does not equal comprehension. Number 9, cultural function. Hebrew, language of scripture in ancient Israel. Yiddish, everyday spoken language developed later in Europe. Point, different purpose, different timeline. Which brings me to point 10, the kill shot, Hebrew versus Yiddish. Hebrew is the original language of the text. Yiddish is not. Yiddish is a European language, a European Germanic language written using Hebrew letters. Same script, different system, different origins, different meaning. When you say things like, you speaking Yiddish, you speaking a white man's Hebrew, that's Yiddish. And let me ask you something. If that were true, then why is it that people who read and speak Yiddish cannot always read and understand Hebrew? And people who read Hebrew cannot always read or understand Yiddish? Have you ever actually sat down and asked someone who speaks one or both what the difference is, or one who reads it? Or are you just assuming that because they're the same letters, then it must be the same language? Because here's the reality. Same letters don't mean same language. If they were the same language, there would be no separation, no confusion, and no need to learn them separately. I'm going to say that again. If Hebrew and Yiddish were the same exact language, because y'all say y'all speaking Yiddish, y'all reading that Yiddish, then there will be no separation. It will be no confusion and no need to learn them separately. Meaning, I read biblical Hebrew. And if you're saying that I'm reading Yiddish, then I should be able to read it the same way I read Hebrew. It should be no difference. It should be no confusion. I should be able to read it with the same steady flow as I read biblical Hebrew. But the fact that I can't, the fact that I'll struggle, the fact that I will look like an idiot trying to read it, a Yiddish book, a Yiddish Bible, shows that there must be a difference then, because he know all the letters. Why can't he read that? Why did the man in New York, the Hasidic Jewish guy, say, yeah, all of them speak Yiddish, but he include himself? But when it comes to Hebrew, no, not so much. No, not so much. So, if they were the same language, there would be no separation in these languages, Hebrew and Yiddish. There would be no confusion with Hebrew and Yiddish, and there would be no need to learn them separately, Hebrew and Yiddish. But that is not what we see in real life. Now, let me ask you all more directly, for you non-believers. Don't deflect. Don't deflect for either question. So for all you who saying that people like me, when we say things like Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashemayim v'etz v'haaretz hatatahu v'hu v'choshe al penei tehum v'ruach Elohim moreh al penei hamayim v'yimer v'yior v'yior v'yara Elohim etz kato. If you're telling me that that's Yiddish, right? Or v'yidaber Elohim etz kol havrim halel amor aneki Yehovah Elohecha asher rozitika min res mizraim be'avadim aneki Yehovah Elohecha asher rozitika min res mizraim be'avadim. Lo yeleka Elohim achrim al panaya. If you're saying that is Yiddish, I have questions for you. Don't run from a single question. Don't deflect. Answer it directly. Be just as direct as I'm being direct in what I'm asking you. So, if you always the white man's language, it's the Jewish and blah, 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 cool, got you. Now we got that out of the way. Answer the question, though. Because that's their cop-out. That's what they do. It's their cop-out. They'll watch this video and they'll find something else to disagree with, but they won't address Yiddish versus Hebrew. Is it the same? They won't compare the text. They won't do that. And look, get this. Some may watch this and be like, okay, he make a point, but they won't repent. They won't go back and make videos and be like, dang, you know what? I saw Judah Sousa's video. I was wrong. Even though I don't deal with it, I was wrong. That's not Yiddish. We've been misleading people. They'll stick to the same old agenda. They'll stick to the same pride. That's what they'll do. And these are the same people that are using Strong's Concordance. We're dealing with the same Hebrew that I'm dealing with. Crazy work. Crazy work. You'll use the Strong's Concordance in a lexicon. We'll deal with the same Hebrew that I'm dealing with. Huh? You'll read from a King James Bible, which comes from the same Hebrew that I'm dealing with when it comes to the Tanakh. Same thing. So that being said, for you non-believers, answer the questions. Don't duck no smoke either. First 3 questions. If Yiddish and Hebrew are the same language, why can a Hebrew reader look at Yiddish and not understand it? Question 2. If they're the same language, why does Yiddish follow a completely different word order and grammar than Hebrew? Question 3. If they're the same language, where is the Hebrew root system in Yiddish words? Don't duck no smoke. Question 4. If Hebrew and Yiddish is the same, why does Hebrew use grammatical markers like et, but Yiddish does not? The Aleph Tav, Yah would call it the Av. The Ah and the Ta, as Yah would say, the Lashawan Kodash people. Question 5. If they're the same language, Hebrew and Yiddish, why do the actual words not match in Genesis 1 and 1? How is it that I can read Genesis 1 and 1 and I look at Genesis 1 and 1 in Yiddish and I'm confused? Let that sit. Let those questions sit, because y'all not going to be able to answer those questions from a linguistic aspect. We're just dealing with the language and not changing topics. Because at some point, you're going to have to stop looking at the letters and start looking beyond the actual. You're going to have to. I'm sorry, because at some point you're going to have to stop looking at the letters and start looking at the actual language beyond those letters. You got to give us something beyond the letters, going into the grammatical function and the structure of the words. You're going to have to do that. And once you do that, the answer becomes obvious. They're not the same language at all. One is Yiddish and the other one is Biblical Hebrew. You're going to have to admit that you've been lied. Answer each question, each of them 5 questions directly and objectively without deflection of any kind. You can't. Now look, as we approach the end, we got the real life versus YouTube life. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know me, this is YouTube live. You don't know me. Versus if you're watching somebody who disagrees with me, you don't know them. That's YouTube. Let's put this test to the test in real life. If you disbelieve, show this to somebody who reads Hebrew. Show this to somebody who reads Yiddish. Approach them, find them, go seek and find. This will be your homework. Let's put this to the test in real life and see if I'm telling the truth or if I'm on to something or if I'm just blatantly lying to you. Real life versus YouTube. Hebrew versus Yiddish test. Test random people. And this is how y'all do it. 1. Show them someone fluent in Hebrew, either Yiddish or Hebrew. Right? Go find someone who speaks Hebrew and hand them Yiddish. Watch what happens. Hand them a Yiddish Bible. Right? Why does this matter? Because real life proof beats theory. People often trust what they can see. Right? So go find somebody who is fluent in Hebrew or is very good at reading Hebrew and put something Yiddish in their face. And you just see what happens. Or vice versa. Go find somebody who deals with Yiddish, right? And then put something Hebrew and watch what happens. 2, show sound differences. Pick Genesis 1:1 and have them both read it out loud. Hebrew would sound like Bereshit bara Elohim. Yiddish won't sound like that. It would be in Yoav hot got. Point, they don't even sound the same. That alone kills the biblical as Hebrew Yiddish argument. Point 3, this one right here. Show root breakdowns versus no roots. Take one Hebrew word, bara, in Genesis 1:1. Break it into root letters, Beit Resh Aleph. Then ask, where is the root system in Yiddish? They won't find it. That alone kills the biblical Hebrew as Yiddish argument. Timeline difference. That's another one. Hebrew is thousands of years old. Yiddish developed in medieval Europe. Point, they don't even exist at the same time. That alone destroys the same language claim. 5, ask them to translate it live. Like find 2 people, one who deals with Yiddish, one deals with Hebrew. Put both on screen and say to them both, read Genesis 1:1. Most people will freeze and say, I don't read the other, Yiddish versus Hebrew. If they do, then ask what's the difference. Make sure one is a Hebrew Bible, other one is a Yiddish Bible. That moment is powerful. You will see for yourself that I'm correct versus people who are lying to you saying that biblical Hebrew is Yiddish. They're lying to you. All right? They're lying to you. Show mixed vocabulary in Yiddish. Yiddish words come from German, Hebrew, Slavic languages. Examples, mindset. That's not a pure Hebrew system. Final kill shot, ladies and gentlemen. Which brings me to point 7. If 2 things have the same letters but different words, different grammar, different sounds, and different origin, then they're not the same language, period. Before you walk away from this, I challenge you to do something simple. Stop listening to opinions and go test this for yourself. Whether you believe that if someone says, Yahweh Bashem Amashiach Yahweh Shah Barakatah, right? Or someone who does not say that. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Someone who don't say that, ask them. Somebody may say, again, Shalom, Yahweh Bashem Hamashiach Yahweh Shah, but somebody else may say Shalom Yahweh, Bashem Hamashiach Yahoshua Yevarek Otka. If you say the second one is Yiddish, then the challenge is simple. Even when y'all say Bahasham, the preposition bait already includes in the. So when y'all say Bahasham, y'all think y'all saying in the name? No, you're saying in the name. In the name. Because you all don't have proper grammar and you don't know that though. So when I say Basham, that includes in the name. Be, meaning in the, Sham or Shem, name. Shalom, hello or peace. Yehovah is what you call Yahweh. Basham is what you call Bahasham. Hamashiach is what you know as the Messiah, or Hamashiach, as y'all say. Yahoshua is what you call Yahweh Shai, or the short form, Yeshua. Yevarek is what y'all say Barak, meaning bless. Otka, you. Y'all would say Atah. So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back. Before you walk away from this, I challenge you to do something simple. Stop listening to opinions and go test it out for yourself. Please do that. Just test this out for yourself. For yourself. I'm willing to have a dialogue on this topic. But you better be able to admit that Yiddish and Hebrew is not the same at all. At all. Start asking people in the Israelite community who actually read biblical Hebrew, you know what I'm saying, what their take on this, on what I'm saying. Ask them plainly. Since you read Hebrew, do you also read Yiddish? If so, what are the differences? If not, why not? Like if there's not no differences, you know what I'm saying? Why not? Why are there no differences? I was asked this today from a brother named Caleb. Caleb, I'm telling you right now, you're going to enjoy this video. Shout out to you. Caleb is the reason why I'm doing this video. I told him I would do a video on this topic because he asked me about this. You know what I'm saying? What did Caleb ask me today? Hold on, let me go to it. He asked me a question. No doubt, Caleb, I'm actually doing a video right now as we speak, brother. So, and I shouted you out. All right, so he asked me, he says, peace, brother, most high in Christ's blessings unto you and your household. Hope all is well in health and spirit. Question. I'm open to learning and understanding. As someone who knows and speaks Hebrew, what are your thoughts on the Yiddish language? What he asked me. I often hear it get criticized for not being the true Hebrew or other things. On the other hand, I've seen the Lashon Kodash, or Lashon Kodesh, as we would say it. That's like what they call Holy of Pure Tongue. I've seen the Lashon Kodash criticized, which I understand from some things I've seen you and other scholarly brothers share. Just one of your thoughts, if you don't mind. You know what I'm saying? So the brother sent me this, ladies and gents. And as you see right here, I'm going to put his name out there. But that's what he sent to me, ladies and gentlemen. That's what he sent. All right? And I sent him a message. So that being said, that's what he sent to me today. And we're going to go ahead and get back to it, ladies and gents. All right. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I said this. Then go to people in the Jewish community and ask them the same exact questions. Ask Hebrew readers, ask Yiddish speakers, or Yiddish readers. Ask them both if you can find them. Hasidic Jews in New York, for example, would definitely know there's a difference between many of them. They'll know there's a difference because many of them actually speak Yiddish. Find someone who can get in contact with real Yiddish and Hebrew speakers and readers and ask them directly. Is biblical Hebrew Yiddish? If not, why not? Like, why is it not? And test it for yourself. Don't assume. Just do that for me. before you come try to critique anything. For real, for real. Have them read Genesis 1, 1 through 3 in Hebrew, then have them read Genesis 1 and 1. I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 in Yiddish. Listen to it when they read it. Look at it. Like the structure of the words. Pay attention. Ask yourself, do these sound the same? Do they look exactly the same beyond the fact that they both use Hebrew letters? Do the actual words look the same? Does the grammar match? Does the sentence structure match? Test the theory with your own eyes before listening to people in our community who lie and tell you that we're dealing with Yiddish, because we're not dealing with the Yiddish language at all. Typically, Hebrew readers don't read Yiddish, and Yiddish readers don't read Hebrew. Yiddish speakers don't speak Hebrew. Hebrew speakers don't speak Yiddish. That's typically how it goes. Typically. Each one of them will know the difference. Test the theory out with your own eyes, even your own ears, before listening to people in the community who will lie to you and tell you we're dealing with Yiddish, because we're not dealing with the Yiddish language. Once again, at some point, you're going to have to start repeating what you heard and start verifying what you see. Because once you actually see it, the answer becomes obvious. The answer becomes obvious. Now, here's the question I want you to sit with. Leave feelings, emotions, opinions off the table and be objective. Don't be subjective, be objective. If two texts, Hebrew versus Yiddish, use the same letters, but have different words, different grammar, different sounds, and different structures, how can they honestly be the same exact language? How can we be dealing with Yiddish? How? Go to anybody that reads the same style of Hebrew that I read and ask them, what's the difference between this and Yiddish? And go find somebody who deal with Yiddish and ask them, what's the difference between this and Hebrew? Biblical Hebrew. Now that being said, watch this. We heard from Alexa. Now let's ask ChatGPT. Let me see what this says. Hold on. All right, ChatGPT, I want to ask you a question. What is the difference between Biblical Hebrew and Yiddish?
Biblical Hebrew is the ancient language of the Hebrew Bible. Think of it as classical, liturgical, and tied to scripture. It has a relatively limited vocabulary and is mostly found in ancient texts. Yiddish, on the other hand, is a much more modern language, emerging around the Middle Ages. It's primarily a spoken, everyday language of Ashkenazi Jews, heavily influenced by German but with a Hebrew-Aramaic component, plus Slavic touches. While Biblical Hebrew is for ancient religious texts, Yiddish was and is a living, everyday vernacular. Different purpose, different era, different linguistic family.
Now, when you say different linguistic family, explain that part for me, please.
Sure. When I say different linguistic family, I mean each language has a different origin and related group. Biblical Hebrew is part of the Semitic language family, like Arabic or Aramaic, so it's rooted in the ancient languages of the Middle East. Yiddish, however, is in the Germanic language family, like German or English, so its core structure is closer to European languages. They come from different branches of the language tree, which is why they sound, look, and function differently.
So English is also Germanic like Yiddish?
Exactly. English and Yiddish are both Germanic cousins. Yiddish emerged from medieval German dialects, so you'll spot similarities, though Yiddish has a strong Hebrew and Aramaic influence mixed in.
Now, what do you mean by Hebrew influence mixed in?
I mean that Yiddish borrowed a lot from Hebrew. It took Hebrew words, especially for religious or cultural concepts, and blended them right into the language. Even the alphabet Yiddish uses is the Hebrew script, not Latin. So while Yiddish grammar is mostly Germanic, it's peppered with Hebrew origin words, especially for things that mattered in Jewish life.
So if somebody reads the Bible like Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'etzaretz, is that the same as the Yiddish Bible in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1? And are they reading Yiddish?
No, not at all. When someone reads Bereshit bara Elohim, they're reading pure biblical Hebrew. The Yiddish Bible, when it translates Genesis 1:1, actually uses Yiddish vocabulary and structure. It wouldn't just present that exact Hebrew phrase. It would give you a Yiddish sentence. So reading the original Hebrew text is Hebrew, not Yiddish. Yiddish is a different language. When you're in Yiddish, it's its own translated version, not just reading Hebrew words as they are.
So what about a person that can read Yiddish and speak Yiddish fluently? If you put a Hebrew Bible in front of them or ask them to speak Hebrew, how does that work? Would it be easy? Would it be hard? Could they do it? Could they not do it?
A fluent Yiddish speaker would have a head start on recognizing some Hebrew-derived words, but that doesn't automatically mean they can read or speak biblical Hebrew. Yiddish and Hebrew have different grammar, different vocabulary for many things, and biblical Hebrew is ancient. So, could a Yiddish speaker understand some Hebrew words? Sure. But speaking or interpreting a Hebrew Bible accurately, they'd need actual Hebrew study. So it's not easy by default. They need to learn Hebrew as its own language.
Now, what if on the contrast, a person who speaks Hebrew and read Hebrew, would they be able to do the same thing when it comes to the Yiddish Bible and speaking Hebrew?
Someone fluent in Hebrew would have an advantage in recognizing Yiddish words borrowed from Hebrew, but Yiddish is still its own language, with a lot of Germanic structure and vocabulary. A Hebrew speaker wouldn't automatically speak Yiddish. It's a different grammar and word base. But with effort, they could learn Yiddish since they'd at least have a head start on the Hebrew-derived bits.
So if you take two people that has never heard of the Hebrew language, I'm sorry, if you had two different communities, one has never heard of the Hebrew language, and all they taught was Yiddish, and all they did was spoke Yiddish. And then you have another community that has never heard of Yiddish, but yet they spoke Hebrew fluently and they read Hebrew fluently. Would each one of them understand each other, or would it be impossible?
They wouldn't understand each other right away. The Yiddish-speaking community would be basically speaking a Germanic language, while the Hebrew-speaking community would be speaking a Semitic language. Yes, Yiddish has Hebrew loanwords, but Yiddish grammar, word order, and most everyday words are closer to German. So a Yiddish speaker would hear Hebrew as a foreign language, and a Hebrew speaker would hear Yiddish as a foreign language. Without study, they'd be lost. They're simply too distinct in structure.
So what about somebody who is German? They're born and raised in Germany, right? And they don't know much about Yiddish, but they speak German. And the person who speaks Yiddish and reads Yiddish, and they're speaking to somebody who understands German, would they more than likely understand each other versus one who deals with Hebrew or not? Give me the rundown.
Yes, a German speaker and a Yiddish speaker would have a much easier time. Yiddish is essentially a Germanic language at its core, derived from medieval German dialects. While Yiddish has its own flavor, German speakers would recognize a lot of the sentence structure and vocabulary. They might find some Hebrew words unfamiliar, but the gist of communication would be far more accessible. In contrast, Hebrew is a completely different language family, so Hebrew and German speakers wouldn't understand each other at all. In short, Yiddish and German are distant cousins, while Hebrew is from a totally separate linguistic world. So Yiddish and German, way more mutual understanding.
Toda Rava, Lehitu Shalom.
Levakasha, shalom velehitraot.
That being said, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Anybody who's saying that they believe that we dealing with Yiddish, send them this video. Send them the video and ask them those questions that I told you to ask. Send them the video. There's a reason why I put the Hebrews on one side and the Jewish people on the other side and me in the middle. Why? Because I'm bridging the gap. I'm bridging the gap. The people on one side, the Israelites, they don't deal with biblical Hebrew. They are lying and saying that it is Yiddish. Versus somebody who speaks Yiddish, you put a Hebrew Bible in front of them, it's going to be difficult. And they know that that's not the same thing. I know there's a difference. Why? Because I didn't come up under no school or anything like that. So I'm able to look at things objectively. So you have me in the middle here, bridging the gap. Is biblical Hebrew Yiddish? So you have some that deals with Hebrew, Jewish people, and you have some that deal with Yiddish. You have the other side that says, well, we only deal with Lashon Kodash because we don't deal with that Yiddish. Well, that's not Yiddish, though. It's not Yiddish at all. But then they'll deal with the Strong's Concordance, which deals with the same Hebrew that they say that they don't deal with. which is literally hypocrisy, contradictory, absurd. So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, people like myself is able to bridge the gap. Yes, people like myself were able to bridge the gap. We know that you all have been lied to. Biblical Hebrew is not Yiddish. Biblical Hebrew is Biblical Hebrew. Yiddish is Yiddish. Yiddish is closer to German, much more far closer than it is to Hebrew.
So do you speak Yiddish?
Yeah, sure.
Do most people here speak Yiddish?
Everyone here speaks.
Everyone?
Yeah.
So Hebrew, no. Not so
No,
much.
not so much.
The question is, are Hebrew and Yiddish similar, or are Hebrew and Yiddish kind of the same language? The answer to that is no, they are different languages. They're often confused with each other because the Yiddish language is written in the Hebrew alphabet in the same way that Farsi or Urdu are written in the Arabic alphabet, or that German is written in the Roman alphabet, just like English is. So someone who doesn't read that script might look at it and think that it's the same language. But Hebrew and Yiddish are different. But Yiddish was spoken by Jews in Europe, and it's the language it's mostly related to is German. It's kind of a medieval form of German. But I understand that to some extent Yiddish speakers can communicate with German speakers and they can understand each other, not fully, but to some extent. So it's mostly related to German.
Well, there y'all have it. Everything you just saw right here, you can never unhear it again. Shalom.